everyone. This is Outnumbered. I'm Emily Campagno here with Dagen McDowell, co-host of The Bottom Line on Fox Business, Molly Line, Fox News correspondent, Tommy Lahren, host of Tommy Lahren is Fearless on Outkick and Fox News contributor, and Jeremy Hunt, Veterans on Duty chairman, Army veteran, West Point graduate, and former congressional candidate. Now we begin with the newly released assessment of the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal. The Biden administration's review mostly gives the president a free pass while shifting blame to his predecessor. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby defended the Biden administration's action in a heated exchange with reporters yesterday. Watch.
Hindsight, in reading this, does the president have any regrets about how this withdrawal was carried out?
The president's very proud of the manner in which the men and women of the military, the Foreign Service, the intelligence community, I went on and on and on, conducted this withdrawal.
Who's going to get fired over this?
Peter, the purpose of the document that we're putting out today is to sort of collate the chief reviews and findings of the agencies that did after-action reviews. It's not the purpose of it is not accountability.
And you're saying that you guys are proud of the way that this mission was conducted?
Proud of the fact that we got more than 124,000 people safely out of Afghanistan? You bet. Nobody's saying that everything was perfect, but there was a lot that went right, and a lot of Afghans are now living better lives in this country and other countries around the world because of the sacrifices and the work of so many American government officials.
Specifically, how is the Trump administration responsible for the disorganized and chaotic process of evacuation and determining who gets to board these evacuation flights?
And so for all this talk of chaos, I just didn't see it, not from my perch. At one point during the evacuation, there was an aircraft taking off full of people, Americans and Afghans alike, every 48 minutes. And not one single mission was missed. So I'm sorry, I just won't buy the whole argument of chaos.
Well, we saw the chaos unfolding right before our eyes. We saw horrific scenes of people clinging to the side of a plane and tragic scenes of Afghans falling from the sky. We saw heartbreaking images of babies being tossed over razor wire and the Taliban shooting people in the streets. We saw the explosion of the suicide bomber who killed hundreds of civilians and 13 U.S. service members. And we heard the emotional and graphic testimony from a Marine who lived through it.
Then a flash and a massive wave of pressure. I'm thrown 12 feet onto the ground, but instantly knew what had happened. I opened my eyes to Marines dead or unconscious lying around me. My abdomen had been ripped open. Every inch of my exposed body, except for my face, took ball bearings and shrapnel. I tried to get up, but could not. Laying there for a few minutes, I started to lose consciousness when I heard Chaz, my team leader, screaming my name as he ran to me. His voice calling to me kept me awake.
Jeremy, what are your thoughts both as a veteran, as a congressional candidate, and as a civilian now?
Yeah, I mean, well, first let me just say this. The gaslighting is just ridiculous. I mean, we have a spokesperson who, by the way, is a retired admiral, John Kirby, retired admiral. For him to get up on the stage and say, well, I don't know about chaos, when we saw those images, as you said, we saw the babies being brought over the razor wire. We saw Taliban literally beating Americans trying to get to the gates. I mean, so for you to say that's not chaos, we know we can't trust this administration to tell us the truth on anything, if that's what they're saying. And then he takes it a step further and he says, well, this isn't about accountability. And I'm looking at this as someone who served in the Army. We would hold 18-year-old privates accountable for losing a few $100s worth of equipment in the Army. You mean to tell me no one in that administration is going to take accountability for the loss of American lives, for the millions of dollars of equipment left behind in Afghanistan with this withdrawal? You know, so I serve as chairman of a group called Veterans on Duty, and our organization was actually founded by a lot of combat veterans who served in Afghanistan who are saying, look, we're sick of what's happening, what's coming out of the White House right now. We need answers. We want a transparent administration, and we need a stronger national security and a ready military. And so I'm proud to serve alongside a lot of these folks, and it's just, we are sick of seeing time and time again, all these displays of cowardice. We need leadership, and that's what's missing right now in our White House.
And yet, Dagen, Kirby defended President Biden, and I think what's hard for us to stomach is the absolute lack of acknowledgement of so many failures, while I guess some small successes. Let's take a listen to him defending President Biden.
You got to look at when he came into office, what he was walking into. He didn't negotiate with the Taliban. He didn't invite the Taliban to Camp David. He didn't release 5,000 prisoners. He didn't reduce force levels in Afghanistan to 2,500. And he didn't have an arrangement with the Taliban that they won't attack our troops. He came in with a certain set of circumstances. He had no ability to change. He had to deal with it based on what he inherited.
Contrast, Dagen, to former Secretary Pompeo's analysis, which was, yeah, we had in place a conditional situation that would have allowed the protection of American forces, the withdrawal of those forces, while not obliterating so many lives there on the ground as well, let alone leaving allies behind to this day.
Sean Duffy and I talked to Kash Patel yesterday, the President Trump's chief of staff for the Department of Defense. And he said Biden's own Department of Defense Inspector General's report points out the key piece of intelligence: do not give up the Bagram airfield, never, ever, because of its proximity to China, because it was our forward operating base for the U.S. and allied partners, and because it's our staging platform where we housed and detained alleged terrorists in Bagram jails. And the suicide bomber who killed those 13 U.S. service members came directly out of that Bagram detention center after Joe Biden let those prisoners out. So how can they say the Trump administration did not provide intel and the recommendation to keep the Bagram airfield, which is widely known? To quote Kash Patel, Biden decided to throw that plan out along with American lives. So to Jeremy's point, and I will say this again, the American people saw what happened, and they heard the lies out of Biden's mouth over and over again in August of 2021. It was a vile cocktail of incompetence and dishonesty.
That's right. Over
and over again. You can get to the airport if you want to. Al-Qaeda's gone from Afghanistan. My military advisors didn't tell me to keep 2,500 troops in Afghanistan. And ever since then, he has had a net disapproval rating. And what they're trying to do, the timing of this, I suspect, is because he's running for re-election, and they're trying to reverse the narrative that none of this is his responsibility. And Peter Doocy pointed out, where was he yesterday? They announced this right before the Easter weekend.
Yep.
On Monday, Thursday, he was in a car with the First Lady, heading out, going to Camp David. Again, he is trying to disavow all of this disaster, which is firmly on his head, neck, and shoulders.
And curiously, Molly, up near the top of this report, it says somehow that the mission was accomplished, somehow that the mission was successful.
Yeah, I printed this out to read it because, as Dagen mentioned, dropped on a Thursday. Not a lot of time to read it before the press briefing, so journalists didn't have a whole lot of time to ingest this. But beyond the argument he made about there not being any chaos, he spent a lot of time talking about how this was the prior administration's fault, which is all over this document. It's a short document, but on nearly every page it points backwards instead of there on the spot. President Biden's choices for how to execute a withdrawal from Afghanistan were severely constrained by conditions created by his predecessor. President Biden had committed to ending the war in Afghanistan, but when he came into office, he was confronted with difficult realities left to him by the Trump administration. There are many sightings throughout just this very brief report where it points backwards. But House Foreign Affairs Chairman Michael McCaul, a Republican from Texas, said that President Biden made the decision to withdraw and even picked the exact date. He is responsible for the massive failures in planning and execution. So while this report came back, we'll immediately see that sort of pushback.
And so, Tommy, we have President Biden who wants to take credit, apparently, for that idea, and yet bears no responsibility of how it was executed.
What's frustrating for me is that they constantly use this, well, we don't want endless wars. You're right, we don't. I don't think that there are a lot of Americans that think that we should have stayed in Afghanistan in perpetuity. I don't think that you're going to find a lot of agreement that we should have stayed there. However, you don't leave the way that you did. And to blame that on President Trump when you are the commander-in-chief is a dereliction of duty. And quite frankly, it's a slap in the face, not only to those service members who served and died, but to the American people. You are the commander-in-chief. You are the leader. This is up to you. You don't leave $7 billion worth of equipment and resources. You don't leave 13 service members who have given up their life, not because they chose to and then this was a part of their duty. It was, but they didn't have to die. If this was handled like a real commander-in-chief would have handled it, this wouldn't have happened. But furthermore, if you make a mistake, you confess to it, you make up for it. You say, we botched this. You have a moment of truth and clarity with the American people, and you say, we messed up, and here's why, and we will never do this again. But you don't say, it's Trump's fault,
right,
and we accomplished the mission, and everything we didn't accomplish is my predecessor's fault, and by the way, peace out, I'm leaving for the weekend. That's not how you handle it.
If I had done a report like that when I was in the Army, an Afghanistan report, just blaming my predecessor for everything and blaming other people instead of myself, I would have been relieved so quickly. I would have been chewed out. I mean, this is absurd that we're seeing this from our commander-in-chief. It does not set an example for anyone in our military today.
No, it doesn't. Hey everyone, I'm Emily Compagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.